The wind bit sharp across the barren rooftops of the village. It wasn't the cold of winter alone. It was the kind of cold that seeped into bones, the kind that whispered to a small child that she was nothing, that she would never be enough. Seraphine shivered, pulling her thin, ragged shawl tighter around her small frame. 9 years old, alone, abandoned, and already carrying the weight of a world that had no space for her. Her tiny hands were red from the frost, fingers stiff, toes numb inside shoes that had seen better winters decades ago. And yet, it was the silence of her parents' absence that was the sharpest sting. The void they left was not just physical. It was carved into her heart, and every cruel whisper from the villagers reminded her of it. She moved through the crooked frozen streets as if she were a shadow, small enough to be overlooked, desperate enough to remain unseen. But the eyes of the village never missed her. Every glance carried judgment, every word carried ridicule. "Shiftless little runt," one boy sneered, hurling a clump of snow at her head. She ducked instinctively, her heart hammering, and felt the laughter behind her ears. Laughter that promised nothing but scorn. It was never just teasing. It was the echo of her parents' rejection, the affirmation that she truly had no place, no value, no right to belong anywhere. Seraphine's life had been nothing but a series of empty days, marked by hunger, humiliation, and cold nights beneath a threadbare blanket. She had learned very early that if she did not fend for herself, no one would. And so she had learned to hide. Her secret, the only thing she had that no one could mock or take away, was her growing latent power, the strange, pulsing energy she felt whenever the moon hung heavy in the sky. She didn't understand it fully, not yet. It came unbidden in moments of fear or desperation, a heat in her chest, a sharpening of her senses, a rhythm that pulsed in tandem with her heartbeat. She had learned to keep it buried, tucked away, because the world would not forgive a girl who was different, who was dangerous, who might one day be powerful. The cold gust of wind carried voices from the marketplace, a mix of gossip, laughter, and scorn. "Did you hear? Her parents left her to rot," a woman said, shaking her head. "She's good for nothing." Seraphine pressed herself against the rough bark of a tree, her small heart threatening to burst from shame and anger all at once. It wasn't just the words. It was the certainty behind them. Everyone in the village knew. Everyone agreed. And she had learned to agree with them herself, quietly, painfully, in the secret spaces of her mind. She was nothing. She was worthless. She was alone. And yet, even in that loneliness, there was a flicker, a dangerous, defiant spark that refused to die. It came in the form of whispers at night, when she lay curled beneath her ragged blanket, listening to the wind howl through the broken shutters. It was the pulse in her veins, the hum beneath her skin that reminded her that she was not entirely powerless. That perhaps somewhere she was more than what the village had made her believe. But that thought was terrifying, almost unbearable, because it also meant she was different, and different drew attention, and attention could be fatal. Her small stomach growled, reminding her that hunger was her constant companion. She slipped through the streets toward the edge of the village, toward the forest where no one dared to go. She knew the stories. Wolves that were said to live there, spirits that haunted the trees, shadows that were not shadows at all. But it didn't matter. The village had no place for her, and the forest, dangerous as it was, offered a chance of survival, or at least of escape. As she stepped carefully over the frozen ground, she heard voices behind her. A group of older boys jeered, their breath steaming in the cold air. "Run, little ghost, run," one of them shouted. Their laughter chased her, but she did not run. Not yet. She stopped, turned her head just slightly, and let a pulse of heat rise from within her chest, a small, controlled flare of the strange power she had learned to command in secret. Her eyes, momentarily brightened with an unnatural glimmer, caught the boy's reflection in the icy puddle before her. They faltered, a flicker of unease crossing their faces, but the moment passed quickly. Fear was fleeting and cruelty was stronger in this village. They laughed again and vanished down the street, leaving Seraphine alone, trembling but defiant. She pressed on, deeper into the woods, where the air smelled of pine and damp earth, where the snow muffled the world outside. Here there were no whispers of judgment, no hands to push her down, no voices to call her worthless. Here she could breathe, even if only slightly, even if only for a moment. And as she walked, she let herself imagine something forbidden, something almost unimaginable. A place where she might belong, a place where her difference would not be a curse but a gift, a place where she might finally be seen. And then, in the stillness of the forest, she heard it. A story carried on the wind, whispered as if the trees themselves were speaking. The Crescent Moon Pack, they take in the lost, the abandoned, the fated, even those the world has forsaken. Her small chest constricted. She had heard of packs before, but they were legends, tales told to frighten children. But this was different. This was real, or it felt real. The possibility of belonging, of acceptance, of being wanted for who she was, not despite it, struck her like a sudden warmth in her cold, empty body. For the first time in her life, Seraphine allowed herself a flicker of hope. She did not yet know the dangers that lay ahead, the trials she would face, or the fearsome alpha who ruled the Crescent Moon Pack with a power that could crush her like a twig. She did not know that her life was about to change in ways she could not imagine, ways that would test every fiber of her being, her courage, and the fragile spark of love and trust she had not dared to dream about. But for now, in the deep shadowed forest, Seraphine walked quietly, her breath misting in the cold air, her heart heavy with past pain yet stubbornly alive with hope. She clutched the edges of her shawl, pressed herself against the trees, and let the whispered promise of the Crescent Moon Pack guide her steps forward. And in that moment the forest felt almost alive, almost waiting. And somewhere, far away yet impossibly close, destiny began to stir. The sun had barely climbed above the jagged rooftops of the village, yet the square was already alive with the sounds of merchants hawking their wares, children squealing and darting between legs, and the constant hum of judgment that seemed to follow Seraphine wherever she went. She stepped cautiously onto the cobblestones, the frost crunching beneath her bare, bruised feet. She kept her head down, shoulders hunched, trying to make herself as small as possible, a ghost moving through a world that had no place for her. But the world did not let her remain invisible. A careless cart rolled too close, knocking her aside, and the coarse laughter of a group of villagers followed. "Watch where you're going, runt," one called, and Seraphine felt the sting of humiliation rise in her chest like molten lead. She bit her lip to stop the tears, trying to swallow the ache of shame that threatened to overflow. It wasn't the snow, not the cold, that wounded her the most. It was the certainty in their voices, the way their words confirmed every fear she had carried since the day her parents turned their backs on her. Her parents. She had thought of them again, though she had tried not to. Their faces, cold and unfeeling, flashed behind her eyelids. She remembered the day they left her, the way they had looked at her not with love or sorrow, but with disdain, as if she were already dead to them. "A waste," her mother had said. "Nothing but a burden," her father had whispered. And the village had repeated it, in every glance, every sneer, every mocking word. She had carried it in her bones for 9 years, a shadow that stretched longer than her small frame, suffocating her even when she tried to breathe. The public square, usually bustling and unremarkable, had become a theater of judgment, and Seraphine was both audience and actor, trapped in a performance she never auditioned for. A group of children circled her, jeering, mimicking her stumbling gait, and throwing small pebbles that stung her arms and legs. She flinched and tried to retreat, but the circle tightened. Her chest heaved, not from exertion but from fear, humiliation, and the bitter sting of helplessness. She wanted to vanish into the earth beneath her, wanted the world to swallow her whole and spare her the agony of their mockery. Then came the whispers. Low, venomous, and cutting sharper than any stone. Even her parents abandoned her. "She's nothing. Worthless. Shiftless." Each word landed with the force of a hammer, pounding on her fragile sense of self. She clutched her chest, trembling, and tried to tell herself that the wind was cold, that the stones underfoot were sharp, that her stomach was empty. But the voices were inside her head now, echoing louder than any physical pain. The shame burned hotter than the biting frost. She wanted to scream, to shout, to lash out, but she had learned long ago that no one would protect her, and retaliation only invited more cruelty. And then, just as she felt the weight of despair pressing her to the ground, something broke inside her. A small, defiant pulse rose from the core of her being, a spark she had carried silently, buried under years of rejection and fear. Her hidden power, the strange and secret pulse that had sometimes whispered to her in the dead of night, flared briefly, a heat that ran along her spine, lighting her senses with a sharp clarity. She blinked, felt her vision sharpen, her hearing heighten, every detail of the square and the villagers' cruel faces etched into her mind with unnatural precision. The children noticed it too. Their laughter faltered, a flicker of unease crossing their faces, but it passed quickly, replaced by mockery once more. The adults too glanced briefly, curious, suspicious, but they did not recognize the moment of power in the small girl they had deemed worthless. And that was the cruelest part. Even her own strength, her own potential was invisible to them. It was then, in the midst of her humiliation, that Seraphine faced a choice. Stay, endure, continue to be mocked, continue to exist under the cold, unfeeling gaze of a world that had never wanted her. Or flee, escape into the forest that edged the village, dark and dangerous, uncertain and unwelcoming. Her mind raced, every instinct screaming at her to survive, to run, to vanish before their cruelty could consume her entirely. But fear tangled with resolve. The forest was not safe. It was a place of unknown predators, shadows that moved like living things, and whispers of wolves whose teeth could shred her as easily as her tormentors had shredded her spirit. Yet staying would mean more humiliation, more rejection, more proof that she was unworthy of life, of love, of belonging. The first step into the forest was hesitant, her small feet crunching over brittle twigs and frozen underbrush. The trees loomed over her like dark sentinels, their branches etched against the pale sky. She could feel the frost biting through her thin shawl, but it was nothing compared to the ache in her chest, the hollow place that had once been her parents' love. The forest was dangerous, yes, but it was hers in this moment, hers to traverse, hers to claim. And for the first time she felt that tiny spark of autonomy, of choice, of defiance. She had not gone far when movement caught her attention, subtle, fluid, like a shadow slipping through shadows. Her pulse quickened, her secret power stirring uneasily beneath her skin, sharpening her senses, reminding her that she was different, dangerous, not to be underestimated. And then she saw him. A figure among the trees, tall, commanding, impossible. Kaelen, the alpha of the Crescent Moon Pack. His eyes, sharp and predatory, had caught her trespass before she even realized she had stepped fully into his domain. Time slowed. Every breath she took seemed amplified in the still, cold forest. Her heart hammered not from fear alone, but from the recognition that destiny had begun to stir, that the lonely, abandoned girl who had believed herself unworthy was now caught in the gaze of something, or someone, that could change everything. Her mind screamed at her to flee, to run as fast as her small legs could carry her, to disappear before he could reach her. But something deeper, unnameable, rooted her to the frozen earth. Curiosity, fear, defiance, and a spark of hope tangled together in a coil she could not untwist. Kaelen stepped closer, silent, graceful, his presence overwhelming yet compelling. He did not speak immediately. His gaze measured her, weighing, assessing, a predator sizing up a fledgling, but there was more than cruelty there. A glimmer of recognition perhaps, or fascination, perhaps even interest. And it terrified her. She had spent her life believing she had no worth, no claim on the world, and yet here he was, a being of unimaginable power, seeing her. Her mind raced, memories of shame and rejection crashing against the raw, pulsing spark of hope that had carried her through the forest. She clenched her fists, feeling the surge of power she had kept hidden for so long. Her senses flared. The smell of pine and frost, the whisper of dry leaves beneath his steps, the thrum of life in the forest, even the faintest vibration of his heartbeat against the distance of his skin. She had been abandoned. She had been mocked. She had been called worthless. But not here. Not now. Not by him, not entirely. Kaelen's eyes narrowed, a faint smile tugging at the edge of his lips, and something unspoken passed between them. A claim, subtle but undeniable. A recognition that she had crossed into a world far beyond the one that had cast her aside. And Seraphine realized, with a mix of awe and terror, that there was no turning back. The forest was no longer merely a refuge. It was the threshold of her destiny, and the alpha before her was the first test she had ever faced in her life. A test that would demand every ounce of courage, cunning, and hidden strength she had ever possessed. Her small chest heaved, not just from cold or fear, but from the realization that she had survived the first moment of true reckoning. And in the silence that stretched between them, broken only by the whispering wind and the crunch of snow beneath her feet, Seraphine understood that life as she had known it had ended. The world that had rejected her was gone, replaced by something unknown, dangerous, and yet full of possibility. Kaelen's gaze lingered, a weight of promise and threat intertwined, and Seraphine felt the first tremor of something she could not name, something that would grow with every heartbeat, every encounter, every stolen glance in the days to come. And then, without a word, he stepped back, fading into the shadows of the trees, leaving her trembling, shivering but alive, and more importantly, aware that she had survived something far greater than mere abandonment or humiliation. For the first time in 9 years, Seraphine realized she had a choice. And though the forest was dark, though the path ahead was uncertain and perilous, the smallest spark of hope burned brighter than the coldest night she had ever known. The forest around Seraphine seemed suddenly alive, every shadow moving with intent, every rustle of leaves echoing with hidden threat. Her pulse raced, a rapid drumbeat that matched the strange, unbidden warmth in her chest. She had not imagined the Alpha would be here so quickly, yet there he was, stepping from the shadows as if the darkness itself had birthed him. Tall, impossibly strong, with eyes that seemed to pierce through not only the trees but through her very soul. He stopped several paces from her, the snow crunching faintly beneath his boots. The forest air, already heavy with frost and the scent of pine, seemed to tense as if waiting for the inevitable collision of two forces. Her fear fragile yet pulsing and his authority unwavering and complete. The wind stirred again, carrying with it the scent of him, earth, fire, wolf. A scent that rooted her to the frozen ground and yet beckoned her forward with a strange, dangerous magnetism. "You shouldn't be here," Kaelen said, his voice calm but laced with steel. Every syllable vibrated through her chest. There was no mockery in his tone, no laughter, but the authority behind it made Seraphine shrink slightly, instinctively retreating. Her small frame felt fragile against his towering presence, and yet a flicker of defiance rose, sharp and bright. She had survived ridicule, abandonment, hunger and cold, but she would not simply bow to this stranger. I didn't mean to," she stammered, voice small, cracking like thin ice. Her heart threatened to burst with a mix of fear, awe, and a pulse of something far more dangerous. Curiosity, unbidden and unsettling in its intensity. Her senses sharpened. She felt the subtle shift in the air around him, the energy coiling just beneath his skin, the predatory awareness of his power. And beneath it all she felt her own hidden, awakening strength, pulsing beneath her ribs, ready to flare if needed. Kaelen's eyes narrowed slightly, observing her. He could sense it, of course. The latent fire she carried, the unusual spark that many in his world would have crushed or ignored. But he did not move closer, not yet. Instead he tilted his head, studying her with a predator's patience, measuring, calculating. He saw her fear, yes, but he also saw her defiance. That defiance intrigued him. That defiance would mark her, even now, as something rare, something worth attention. A sudden movement startled them both, a branch snapping underfoot, but neither reacted immediately. Seraphine's body tensed, ready to flee, ready to fight. Kaelen's presence shifted slightly, the subtlest trace of a warning, yet laced with restraint. The tension between them was a living thing, stretching across the frost-covered ground like a taut cord, vibrating with unspoken challenges. "I warned you," Kaelen said finally, stepping forward, and this time his presence pressed against her senses, a weight she could not ignore. "You are far from home. And yet you continue." Seraphine swallowed hard. The cold bit at her skin, but her blood burned hotter, alive with the pulse of fear and excitement. I have nowhere else to go," she whispered almost to herself. But her words were not weakness. They were admission, a tiny fissure opening in the wall she had built around her heart. Kaelen's lips curved into the faintest smile, almost imperceptible, and then he moved with the grace of a shadow among shadows, closing the distance between them by a few paces, enough to make her breath hitch. "And yet you are here. Alone. Defiant. Afraid but not broken." There was something in his tone, in the cadence of his words, that unsettled her even as it sparked something she had never felt before. Recognition? Interest? Desire? The lines blurred, leaving her disoriented, aware of the heat pooling in her chest, her pulse hammering against her ribs. A sudden surge of energy ran through her, latent, raw, unrefined, but Kaelen noticed. A subtle flicker, almost imperceptible but enough. His eyes darkened, a dangerous glint passing through them, and in that instant she knew something had changed. The spark of her difference, her potential had been seen and recognized. A predator marking its prey? Perhaps. But there was more. A promise. A claim. Something inescapable. The tension snapped almost violently when Kaelen extended his hand, just slightly as if offering, not help, not surrender, but acknowledgement. A gesture both commanding and strangely tender. Seraphine's body responded against her will, a pull she did not yet understand, and instinctively she flinched backward. "You are fated," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "Do not mistake my claim for kindness. But know this, you are mine whether you choose it or not." The words hit her like a cold, sharp blade. Her mind reeled, fear, fascination, and the smallest, most dangerous spark of hope colliding violently within her. His eyes held hers with a weight she could not escape. She wanted to run. She wanted to shrink into the earth and disappear. And yet, against every instinct honed by years of survival and abandonment, she stayed rooted. Because in that instant, something deep inside her stirred. Something that whispered she had survived the impossible before. Something that hinted that, perhaps, survival was not enough anymore. Perhaps she deserved more than mere existence. Perhaps, in the presence of Kaelen, something extraordinary awaited. And then, with a grace that made her pulse stutter, he stepped back, his presence lingering in the air, leaving a void she could feel in her chest. The forest seemed suddenly quieter, as if holding its breath. The danger, the promise, the claim, all of it hung heavy between them, unspoken yet undeniable. Seraphine realized, with a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold, that nothing would ever be the same again. Life within the Crescent Moon Pack was nothing like the broken village she had fled. The forest cleared into vast halls and hidden glades, territories that were fiercely guarded, marked by power and hierarchy. Seraphine quickly realized that survival here demanded more than cunning or courage. It demanded obedience, attentiveness, and an instinctive understanding of the delicate, often ruthless pack politics. Every step she took was measured, every glance noted. Some pack members looked at her with disdain, dismissive whispers passing between them. Others simply observed silently, calculating. And through it all, Kaelen's presence was constant, a shadow at the edge of her awareness, watching, judging, waiting. His scrutiny was not cruel, not always, but it was relentless, and it made her every nerve alert, her heart taut with tension. She learned the rules quickly. Hierarchy mattered. Territory mattered. Loyalty mattered. And yet, amidst the harshness, there were glimpses of unexpected humanity in Kaelen. Rare moments when his gaze softened, when he lingered just a little too long on some trivial detail, when a flicker of humor touched his lips in private moments she happened to witness. These glimpses were brief, fleeting, yet they startled her, reminding her that the alpha who could crush her with a single thought was not entirely devoid of warmth. The contrast tore at her in confusing ways. Public life was brutal, cold, demanding perfection, but private life, the life glimpsed in stolen moments under moonlight in shadowed corners, revealed a man not just of power but of depth, of vulnerability, of complexity. It left her heart pounding with emotions she had never dared to name, a cocktail of fear, respect, fascination, and something far more dangerous: attraction. One night, while the pack slept under the vast silver moon, Seraphine stumbled upon Kaelen tending to a small injury, his usual stoic demeanor gone. His hands were steady, careful, almost gentle as they worked, and for the first time she saw him not as an alpha, not as a predator, but as a man. A man with burdens, with vulnerabilities, with pains he carried silently. She could not stop herself from sharing a fragment of her own story. Her parents' abandonment, the cruelty of the village, the isolation of her childhood. She spoke quietly, fearing judgment, yet needing to be heard. And in response, Kaelen did not dismiss, did not belittle, did not command. He listened. Truly listened. And in that moment, a fragile bridge formed between them. It was a connection built not on desire alone, but on understanding, on shared pain, on the recognition that both carried scars hidden from the world. A spark ignited, subtle, electric, dangerous, and utterly impossible to ignore. The following weeks were marked by small, repeated rituals that drew them closer. Moonlit storytelling beneath the silver glow, where secrets were shared in whispers. Combat training, where every clash of hands and feet became a lesson in trust and awareness. Healing sessions where minor injuries were tended to and hands brushed with lingering warmth. Shared meals in secret, moments of laughter that felt like rebellion against the harshness of pack life. Each repetition built intimacy. Each shared glance, each subtle touch, each acknowledgement strengthened the invisible thread binding them together. Finally, Kaelen presented Seraphine with a gift. A small, secluded sanctuary within the pack's territory, shielded from prying eyes, a space where she could exist without fear. "I see you," he said simply, voice low but deliberate as he handed her the key. Not just the physical key but the declaration itself. Recognition. Validation. A spark of hope that perhaps for the first time in her life she belonged somewhere. The forest was quiet that night, the moon suspended like a pale sentinel above the frost-laden trees, casting a silver glow over the Crescent Moon Pack's territory. Seraphine moved softly along the hidden path that led to her sanctuary, her breath misting in the cold air. Every heartbeat seemed louder than the last, echoing not in the forest, but in her chest, in her thoughts, in the small, fragile space where her emotions had begun to stir and grow. He thought of Kaelen, of the way he had looked at her, not with the indifferent dominance she had expected, but with attention, recognition, and something she dared not name. Her chest tightened, an ache that was both beautiful and terrifying, and she realized with a clarity that made her gasp that her thoughts no longer wandered to survival or safety first. They wandered to him. To his presence, his gaze, the rhythm of his power that seemed to hum in harmony with her own latent energy. A part of her recoiled. She had been taught, long before she even understood love, that she was unworthy. Abandoned. Defective. Shiftless, her parents had called her. And yet, every encounter with Kaelen had slowly, subtly, chipped away at the armor she had worn for so long. The warmth in his rare smiles, the softness in fleeting moments, the acknowledgement of her worth. It had taken root in her heart, a tiny, fragile seed growing faster than she could have imagined. But fear clawed at her as well. Love was dangerous. Love demanded vulnerability, and vulnerability had always meant pain. Her heart remembered the sharp sting of rejection, the cold betrayal of those who should have protected her. Could she risk it again? Could she risk the depth of longing she felt for him, knowing that one revelation, one misstep, could shatter everything she had dared to hope for? Her steps faltered, and she pressed her hand to her chest, the weight of her own feelings almost suffocating. The forest, so serene, felt suddenly confining, pressing in from all sides, as if the trees themselves were aware of the storm of emotions within her. And then she overheard a whisper carried on the wind, not a voice she recognized, yet unmistakable in tone and urgency. The bond is forbidden, the fated may not choose freely. Her blood ran cold. She froze, ears straining to catch more, her pulse a rapid drumbeat of anticipation and dread. Forbidden? What did it mean? Her thoughts twisted violently. Was it Kaelen? Her feelings? Their growing connection? The word forbidden seared into her mind, echoing the warnings she had buried deep since childhood. That she was never meant to belong, never meant to be loved, never meant to exist fully in any world. And yet, the warmth in her chest, the ache of longing refused to be silenced. He loved him. He could not deny it anymore. Every glance, every shared silence, every secret smile had woven itself into the very fabric of her being. She loved Kaelen, not the alpha she feared, not the predator she expected, but the man who had seen her, truly seen her, in a way no one else ever had. But even as she admitted it to herself, fear and hope tangled in a knot too sharp to ignore. The prophecy, whispered like a shadow, lingered in the air, a promise of danger and heartbreak. And in that instant, Seraphine understood that love for her would never be simple. The morning came, pale and reluctant, casting a muted light over the pack's territory. Seraphine awoke with a heavy chest, her dreams haunted by the echo of forbidden words. She moved silently through the compound, careful to avoid attention, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. Kaelen appeared at the edge of the clearing, his presence like a storm breaking over the calm. His eyes held something she had not seen before, tension, restraint, a flicker of pain beneath the dominance. And in that moment, the truth she had not dared to imagine became unavoidable. "You need to understand," he began, voice low, measured, "that what binds us, what draws you to me, is not simple desire. It is fate. A bond written long before either of us knew it existed. But there are rules, laws, of the pack that cannot be broken without consequence." Seraphine's chest tightened. Her stomach churned. "A bond? Laws? Kaelen, what are you saying?" He stepped closer, his hand hovering near her shoulder but not touching, a gesture both protective and forbidding. "You are my fated, Seraphine. But our union, our connection, it is not permitted. Not yet. My predecessors, the Pack Council, they would never allow it. And your lineage, your gift, it carries a curse they would not forgive." Her mind spun. Bonded? Cursed? Forbidden? Every emotion collided in her chest, a storm she could not tame. Anger, despair, longing, fear, each surged in turn, leaving her breathless, trembling. She had dared to hope, dared to feel, dared to imagine a life beyond the isolation and abandonment that had defined her, and now that fragile hope seemed to crumble like ice underfoot. Kaelen's expression softened briefly, fleetingly, before the mask of Alpha returned. "I wish it were different," he said, voice almost breaking, though only he would know. "I wish we could choose freely. But rules are rules, Seraphine. Fate is not negotiable." Her hands shook, fists curling at her sides. "Then why do you look at me like that? Why do you linger if you cannot stay?" He stepped back, his gaze heavy with pain and desire, frustration and longing. "Because I cannot deny what I feel, even as I must honor what I cannot change. And that is agony for both of us." The forest seemed suddenly suffocating. Every tree, every shadow, every whisper of wind carried the weight of his words. Seraphine's heart ached, a hollow, relentless pulse that mirrored the despair in Kaelen's own chest. She wanted to scream, to demand, to claw back the fragments of her hope. But even as the fire in her chest flared, she realized that some forces, some bonds, could not be bent by desire alone. And as Kaelen turned, retreating into the depths of the forest, she felt the first true sting of absence, a hollow wound deeper than any she had ever known. Days passed like frozen stone, heavy and unyielding. Seraphine moved through the pack's territory in a daze, every sound, every shadow a reminder of Kaelen's absence. The gift of recognition, the sanctuary he had given her, now felt like a cage, a gilded prison where she could remember what she had lost but could not reach. The council's decision had been final. Forbidden. Dangerous. And so she was offered temporary shelter far from the Alpha, in a distant, wild territory where survival was uncertain, danger ever present, yet she had no choice but to comply. She left at dawn, the snow crisp beneath her feet, her heart heavy with longing and despair. The journey was brutal. Harsh winds cut her face, treacherous paths threatened her small, fragile body, and loneliness became a living thing, pressing in from every side. Each night she lay beneath the stars, shivering, and replayed every moment with Kaelen, every glance, every touch, every whispered word of connection, trying to anchor herself to the memory of him even as the world insisted on his absence. Her mind wandered constantly, a ceaseless torrent of longing, reflection, and self-recrimination. She asked herself endlessly, was she not enough? Was her presence a threat to him? Was the love she felt raw and unguarded, truly forbidden, or merely a truth the world was too cruel to allow? And yet, even in despair, there was a flicker. A spark that refused to die. She could not see him, could not touch him, but the bond he had marked her with lingered, subtle and unrelenting. A pulse beneath her skin, a whisper in her mind, a promise that fate had not yet finished with them. The forest, harsh and wild, became both refuge and torment. Every sound, every rustle, every shadow reminded her of Kaelen, of the danger, the longing, the bond, and the forbidden truth that separated them. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the snow, Seraphine understood, with a clarity born of heartbreak and desire, that their story was far from over. Fate had pulled them apart, but it had also marked them indelibly, irrevocably. And though despair gnawed at her, a quiet, burning hope whispered through the ache, that one day, in defiance of rules, curses, and prophecy, they might be whole again. The Crescent Moon Pack's central clearing shimmered under the pale glow of the full moon, a silver sheen illuminating the faces of pack members gathered for the ceremonial council. Torches flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced like restless spirits across the frost-hardened ground. Every breath hung in the cold night air, visible as mist, every heartbeat of the gathered wolves echoing a rhythm older than the forest itself. Seraphine stood at the edge of the clearing, her small form tense, shoulders hunched, chest rising and falling in nervous anticipation. She had traveled back from exile under the cover of darkness, guided by whispers of unrest. Rumors had reached her ears, rumors of enemies approaching, enemies who sought to destabilize the pack and perhaps to tear her and Kaelen apart forever. Each step she took toward the council stirred her secret power, a latent pulse under her skin, a low hum of energy she had learned to contain barely but never ignore. Kaelen stood at the center of the gathering, his form commanding, alpha authority radiating in waves that seemed to push the frost back from the ground. The pack's leaders bowed or knelt in acknowledgement, yet even among them, tension hung like a low fog, heavy and suffocating. Kaelen's gaze swept the crowd with predatory precision, and when it fell upon Seraphine, it softened ever so slightly, a fleeting acknowledgement that she had returned. That she belonged if only in part. The ceremony began, voices chanting in the old language of the pack, a rhythm that vibrated through Seraphine's chest and stirred her latent energy. The moonlight intensified, spilling silver across Kaelen's face, illuminating the sharp angles of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes, the power that made her tremble even from a distance. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, she noticed it. The shift in the clearing, the ripple through the crowd, the subtle tightening of every muscle as a new presence intruded. Enemies. The word barely registered before chaos erupted. Figures cloaked in shadows surged forward, breaking the solemn rhythm of the ceremony. Weapons flashed, claws gleamed, and the air exploded with the raw violence of attack. Shouts pierced the night, blending with the snapping of branches, the howls of alarmed wolves, and the guttural commands of Kaelen as he moved with terrifying speed. Seraphine froze, momentarily paralyzed, fear tightening its grip around her chest. Her mind screamed at her to flee, to hide, to disappear into the forest that had once been both prison and sanctuary. But then Kaelen appeared, stepping between her and the nearest threat, eyes blazing, body taut with controlled fury. The world narrowed to the pulse of his energy, the weight of his presence, and the undeniable pull of something deeper than fear, something she had not yet named, but had begun to recognize as belonging, connection, and a spark of love that terrified her as much as it thrilled her. Claws and teeth flashed in the torchlight, the clash of power reverberating through the clearing. Seraphine's instincts surged, her hidden power flared involuntarily, a subtle pulse that sent ripples through the attacker's ranks. One of the enemies faltered, distracted by the sudden shimmer of energy radiating from her, and in that moment Kaelen's hand brushed hers, almost accidental, yet charged with intent. Her pulse jumped, heart hammering, a mix of fear, exhilaration, and an ache she had only felt when in his presence before. "Move," Kaelen commanded, voice cutting through the chaos like steel. His dominance was absolute, a tide she could not resist, and yet, unlike before, she did not recoil. Instead, her hidden strength, the spark he had recognized from their first encounter, rose to meet the demand. She shifted, her senses sharpening, movements flowing with a grace she had never known, responding not out of obedience alone but out of a raw, instinctual need to protect. The enemies closed in again, and this time Seraphine met them. Her hands blazed with the shimmer of latent power, claws materializing for a moment before vanishing, a flicker that stunned those who dared approach. She moved like wind through the trees, light-footed yet precise, her fear tempered by the rush of adrenaline and the undeniable knowledge that she was no longer helpless. Kaelen fought beside her, a blur of controlled aggression, teeth flashing, claws cutting, every motion a dance of power and dominance. Their movements synced almost instinctively, an unspoken bond guiding them through the chaos. And in that alignment, Seraphine felt something she could not deny. She belonged here. Not just in the pack, not just near Kaelen, but in the very rhythm of the fight, in the raw, terrifying dance of survival. The battle raged, voices screaming, branches snapping, and the cold night air thick with tension and magic. At one point, a particularly vicious assailant lunged at Kaelen, fangs bared, and without thinking, Seraphine threw herself into the path, claws and raw energy flaring, absorbing the brunt of the strike. Pain exploded across her side and she cried out, but Kaelen's voice, low and full of rage and relief, reached her through the chaos. "Seraphine." The shout was both command and plea. Her vision blurred, but in that blur she saw him, Kaelen's eyes, blazing with protectiveness, with something deeper than anger. Love, perhaps, or something that mirrored her own. The moment crystallized, freezing her in time. She had fought to survive, to prove herself, and now, in the heat of the battle, she realized the depth of her attachment. She could not exist apart from him, could not imagine the world without his presence anchoring her. And then the shocking revelation. One of the enemies spoke, a cruel smirk in their voice, carrying a secret meant to shatter the fragile bond they had been building. "So, this is the fated bond you dared to hide, Alpha. The girl who has the spark. The one forbidden by prophecy." The words hit the clearing like a knife. Gasps echoed, and all eyes turned toward Seraphine and Kaelen. Her heart thumped violently. The secret, The forbidden bond that had been whispered on winds long ago was exposed in front of the entire pack and the enemy forces alike. Fear, humiliation, and awe surged through her. Her hand trembled, brushing against Kaelen's, instinctively seeking the connection that tethered her to reality and to him. Kaelen's jaw tightened. His hand found hers deliberately this time, holding her in the chaos, grounding her. "Do not falter," he growled, voice low but resolute, carrying the weight of authority and the promise of protection. "You are mine. And no prophecy, no enemy, no pack rule can take you from me." The clearing erupted again, enemies pressing forward, the pack rallying, and Seraphine felt an unexpected surge of courage. Her fear did not vanish, but it transformed, sharpened into focus. She would fight. He would protect him. She would not let the weight of past abandonment, forbidden bonds, or prophecies dictate her actions any longer. For the first time she understood fully the meaning of bravery, not the absence of fear but the decision to act despite it. And in that moment, amidst the chaos, the shouts, the clashing of claws and teeth, the metallic tang of blood in the frost, she realized something deeper. She loved Kaelen not only in stolen moments of quiet but here in the storm, in the fire of conflict, in the face of danger and destiny. The fight raged on, and every movement, every shared glance, every protective instinct reinforced the bond between them. Kaelen, fierce and unyielding, trusted her instinct, her presence, her strength. And in turn she trusted him, not blindly, not naively, but with the full force of her heart and the raw knowledge that their connection, though forbidden and fraught with danger, was undeniable. As the last of the immediate attackers faltered and the pack regained control, silence descended, heavy and fragile. The torches flickered, the moonlight shifted, and the frost-covered ground glistened like silver. Seraphine sank to her knees, chest heaving, exhaustion mingling with relief, and Kaelen knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You are mine," he whispered, voice low, intimate, yet commanding enough to be heard by the few nearest to them. "And I will not let anyone take you." Her eyes met his, wide, filled with both awe and the unspoken acknowledgement of the bond that now publicly could never be unseen. Forbidden, yes, but undeniable. Dangerous, yes, but precious. And in the silence that followed, the tremor of shared breath and heartbeat between them, Seraphine understood something she could not yet voice. This storm had not destroyed them. It had forged them. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the forest, hidden from view, she felt the faintest shimmer of destiny shifting, bending toward a reckoning that would demand courage, sacrifice, and the unflinching declaration of love. The frost clung to the trees like a shroud as Seraphine crouched behind a fallen log, breaths shallow and ragged. The air was thick with smoke and tension, the distant shouts of the pack and the clash of claws still echoing through the clearing. She could feel it, the lingering pulse of danger, the invisible threads of fate stretching taut between her and Kaelen, who now faced the impossible. He had the world in his hands, power, dominance, a legacy that demanded obedience, but the pull toward her, toward what he could not yet name, was undeniable. And every second he lingered in indecision threatened to shatter the fragile balance of survival and love. Kaelen stood at the center of the clearing, the silver moonlight catching the angles of his face, sharp and commanding, yet there was a tension there she had never seen before. He was poised, alpha strength radiating from every movement, yet behind the confidence, the absolute control, there was hesitation. A crack in the armor of a man who had rarely, if ever, been forced to choose between duty and desire. The enemy forces had regrouped, circling, waiting for him to falter, but the real battle was inside him, not out there. Seraphine's pulse thundered in her ears as she assessed the scene. She had seen him command, seen him dominate, seen him strike down foes with ruthless precision, but now she saw something more human. Vulnerability. The weight of the legacy pressing down on him, the invisible chains of expectation, and the gnawing ache of desire for a choice he had not yet been allowed to make. Her chest ached at the sight. She wanted to rush to him, to throw herself into his path, to make him see that some things, the heart, the bond, the spark between them, were worth more than power or rule. And then, without conscious thought, she moved. The wind carried her forward, every step a careful negotiation with fear and instinct. Her hand brushed the frost-covered bark of a nearby tree for balance, and she felt the familiar surge of power within her, raw and untamed, waiting for the right moment to ignite. She had survived abandonment, exile, and humiliation, but now she faced the conscious decision to confront the impossible. To intervene, to disrupt, to risk everything for the man who had claimed her as fated, who had ignited something deep and relentless in her soul. The enemies pressed closer, sensing opportunity, but Seraphine's gaze locked on Kaelen. He was frozen in that terrible limbo of choice, every muscle taut, every breath measured. His eyes flicked to her, and in that fleeting moment she understood the unspoken truth. He was waiting for her to act. Waiting for the courage she had never known she possessed. An act she did. She burst from her hiding place, a streak of defiance cutting through the frost-laden night. Her voice rang out clear and fierce. "Kaelen, you are not alone." The words carried across the clearing, cutting through the chaos like a blade, and she saw his gaze snap to hers, eyes widening for the briefest instant before the storm of battle and authority reclaimed him. Claws flashed, teeth glinted, and the first enemy lunged toward Kaelen, reckless, desperate. Seraphine did not hesitate. She leapt forward, a force of instinct and raw energy intercepting the strike. The collision sent a shock through her body, pain exploding in her side as she absorbed the attack, but she did not falter. Her power, once latent and uncertain, flared with a brilliance that stunned both the pack and their enemies. Energy shimmered around her like silver fire, a visible testament to the bond she shared with Kaelen, the spark he had first marked, now uncontainable and undeniable. Kaelen's eyes met hers across the chaos, and for a fleeting second the world fell away. The enemies, the frost, the ceremonial clearing, all of it vanished. There was only her courage, her unflinching choice to stand in his path, to save him, to assert their bond in a world that sought to deny it. The Alpha's usual dominance faltered, not for long, but long enough to see the depth of her bravery, to feel the undeniable pull of the bond they shared, and to recognize that her actions were more than survival, they were a declaration. "You're reckless," he said, voice rough, carrying both reprimand and awe. His words were cut short as another assailant approached, but this time she was ready. Every movement was precise, a dance of instinct and determination. She blocked, deflected, and struck with a combination of human agility and the unrefined power of her hidden gift. Her muscles screamed, her lungs burned, but she did not yield. For the first time she understood that sacrifice was not a choice. It was a necessity, a truth born of love and loyalty that eclipsed fear. Kaelen roared, a sound that seemed to shake the very trees, his fury unleashed and directed at the attackers with terrifying precision. But even in his rage he glanced at her again, and in that glance there was something unspoken. Trust, recognition, an acknowledgement that her courage had changed the calculus of the battle. She was no longer the fragile, abandoned girl of the village. She was his equal in courage, bonded in ways that transcended prophecy, law, and fear. The enemies faltered, distracted, and the pack surged forward to reclaim dominance. Seraphine's side throbbed with pain and she stumbled slightly, but Kaelen was there instantly, hand on her shoulder, grounding her amidst the chaos. "Step back," he commanded, voice low, carrying authority, urgency, and something more tender, almost intimate. "You've done enough." She shook her head, lips trembling. "No. Not enough. Not while they." Her words broke, swallowed by the roar of the pack, the clash of claws and fangs, and the raw energy that surged between her and Kaelen. She realized then that she could not be passive, could not allow him to face impossible choices alone. Every moment she had endured exile, humiliation, and fear had led to this. A choice to act, to risk, to sacrifice, to stake claim on their bond in the harshest of public arenas. Kaelen's eyes softened, a rare glimpse of vulnerability crossing the mask of dominance. "Seraphine, if you are seen like this—" "I am seen," she interrupted, voice steady, unwavering. "Let them see. Let the world see what we are. What we mean to each other." Time seemed to stretch. The moon above hung like a sentinel, silver light bathing the clearing. Every movement, every sound, every flicker of shadow carried weight. The enemy forces hesitated, the pack watched, and in that tense pause the unspoken truth solidified. Seraphine had claimed her place not through quiet submission, but through action, through bravery, through the undeniable force of love and loyalty. Kaelen's jaw clenched, a low growl escaping as he registered the defiance, the courage, the bond made manifest. He had choices, power or love, duty or heart. But her actions had shifted the balance. She had acted where he could not, or had not dared. Her sacrifice, her intervention, her willingness to break rules and face danger for him had spoken volumes louder than any declaration could. For the first time, Kaelen allowed himself to step beyond the rigid expectations of alpha authority, to act not as a leader defined by duty, but as a man defined by heart. His claws struck true, his fangs tore through the tension, the enemies faltering under the precision and power of his rage. But always his eyes returned to her, to the small, trembling figure whose courage had eclipsed fear itself. She stumbled again as the battle waned, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. Kaelen's hand found hers once more, firm, grounding, tethering her to reality and to him. "You could have died," he murmured, voice low, almost intimate, carrying the weight of authority, relief, and something softer, forbidden, and utterly consuming. "I would do it again," she whispered, lips trembling, eyes locked on his. "For you, always. No matter the cost." The enemies had been pushed back, the pack regained control, but in the aftermath silence fell heavy, profound. Snow drifted from the trees, settling over the clearing like a fragile blanket. Torches flickered, casting long, wavering shadows. And in the quiet that followed, the ultimate choice had been made. Not by proclamation, not by decree, not by prophecy, but by action, by courage, by the raw, unshakable force of love manifested through sacrifice. Kaelen studied her, chest heaving, eyes softened by moonlight and emotion, and for the first time he allowed himself to acknowledge the truth aloud. "You are more than I ever expected. More than any bond or prophecy could define. You've chosen, and in doing so, you've shown me the path I could not see alone." Her gaze met his, unwavering, fierce, and tender all at once. "Then choose me," she whispered, a plea and a command entwined, raw and vulnerable. "Not duty. Not prophecy. Not power. Me." And in that moment the world fell away. The frost, the torches, the distant echoes of battle. There was only them, hearts beating, breaths mingling in the cold night air, the spark of bond and defiance burning brighter than any danger, any rule, any expectation. Kaelen reached for her, hand steady, touch deliberate, grounding her amidst the chaos and the aftermath. "Then I choose you. Always." And in that choice something shifted, not just between them but in the very air, the pack, and the night itself. The ultimate choice had been made. Love had triumphed, not over rules alone, but over fear, over duty, over the shadows of the past. Sacrifice had proven its power, and together, they would face whatever storms remained. The first rays of dawn pierced the frost-covered treetops of the Crescent Moon territory, painting the clearing with a soft, golden light. It was a deceptive peace, a quiet that followed the storm, yet carried a weight of anticipation that pressed against Seraphine's chest like a living thing. The night's chaos had left the air thick with tension, lingering scents of blood and smoke, and an electric charge that hummed beneath her skin. Every nerve in her body was alive, attuned to Kaelen, to the pack, to the fragile balance between survival and destiny. Seraphine moved carefully, each footstep deliberate, pressing her gloved hand against the frost-hardened ground. Her senses, sharpened by fear, by survival, by raw emotion, absorbed everything. The rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of pack members reorganizing, the faint shimmer of magic that clung to the air after the battle. Her senses, sharpened by fear, by survival, by raw emotion, absorbed everything. The rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of pack members reorganizing, the faint shimmer of magic that clung to the air after the battle. And beneath it all she felt it again. The pulse, subtle but undeniable, of Kaelen's presence, the tether that bound them, a bond forged in trials, sacrifices, and moments of vulnerability so deep they left scars that could never truly fade. Kaelen stood a few paces ahead, still illuminated by the morning light, body tense, eyes sharp, but with the edges softened by the exhaustion and relief of survival. His chest rose and fell with measured breaths, and his gaze searched the clearing, taking in the remnants of the confrontation with a mix of authority and vulnerability. For the first time, Seraphine saw him not merely as the alpha who wielded power like a weapon, but as the man who had carried burdens invisible to all but her. And she understood, with a clarity that pierced every layer of her being, that the trials of the past night were only the beginning of a transformation that demanded courage, honesty, and surrender. The frost sparkled beneath her fingertips as she stepped forward, the cold biting through her gloves, yet she barely noticed. Her focus was absolute, centered entirely on the man who had claimed her as fated, who had challenged every notion of fear and worthlessness she had ever carried. She remembered the whispers of her parents' abandonment, the sharp sting of rejection, the endless nights where she had questioned her own existence. And now, standing in the clearing, heart pounding, she understood that those wounds, the invisible curse that had haunted her for years, were poised to break. Kaelen's gaze met hers, a flash of recognition passing between them, heavy with unspoken words. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice low, carrying both concern and expectation, the weight of responsibility and desire intertwining like threads of silver. This is the moment where we either claim what is ours, or let it slip through our hands." Seraphine swallowed hard, the words lodged in her throat, unformed yet understood. "I'm ready," she whispered, voice trembling but firm. She could feel the raw energy of her power stirring beneath her skin, a surge that had always been both frightening and exhilarating. It was not just her gift, it was the culmination of every fear, every trauma, every rejection she had ever endured. And now it was ready to ignite, not in fear but in defiance, in courage and in love. The clearing seemed to hold its breath as Kaelen approached, steps measured, deliberate, yet imbued with a grace that was both commanding and intimate. The frost crunched beneath their feet, and every movement carried the tension of anticipation, the delicate balance between danger and triumph, chaos and clarity. Seraphine felt her chest tighten, a pulse of fear and hope colliding in the rhythm of her heartbeat. She had loved before, truly, deeply, but never with such stakes, never with a bond that demanded everything she had and everything she could ever hope to be. Kaelen extended a hand, not as a gesture of command but of invitation. "Together," he said, voice low, magnetic, almost hypnotic. "We face it, we break it, together." Seraphine placed her hand in his, the warmth radiating from his palms seeping into her very core. The forest seemed to shift, the wind stirring, carrying with it a charge that set every nerve alight. She felt it, the subtle tremor beneath the ground, the pulse of the pack, the energy of the unseen, the ancient rhythm of the moon and the magic that coursed through the land. It was as if the world itself had paused, waiting, aware that something monumental was about to occur. "Close your eyes," Kaelen instructed, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture so intimate it stole her breath. "Feel it. Not fear. Not doubt. Feel this. Feel the bond that cannot be denied." Seraphine obeyed, letting the dawn's light wash over her closed eyelids, letting the frost and cold fade into insignificance. Her mind turned inward, reaching through layers of trauma, layers of shame, layers of fear that had held her captive since the night her parents abandoned her. She breathed deeply, drawing in the crisp morning air, and with every exhale she released fragments of the past, rejection, humiliation, despair. Each breath was a shattering of chains, a fracture in the invisible walls that had enclosed her heart. And then she felt it, Kaelen's energy, steady, warm, anchoring her. Not dominance, not command, but presence, pure, unyielding, and unwavering. It intertwined with hers, not merging but harmonizing, a symphony of strength and vulnerability, power and tenderness. The pulse of their connection thrummed beneath her skin, and she understood fully, viscerally, that this was the moment of transformation. "Together," he repeated, voice deeper now, resonating in her chest, syncing with the rhythm of her heartbeat. "Release it. Let it go. Let us be free." The words acted as a key, unlocking the floodgates. Seraphine felt the latent power she had feared, hidden for so long, surge through her in waves. It was not violent, not destructive, but purifying. It swept through her, washing away years of trauma, the sting of parental betrayal, the whispers of inferiority, and the shadows of abandonment. Each pulse of energy was a confirmation, a reclamation of self. And through it all, Kaelen's presence was steady, a constant tether that gave her the courage to embrace the change rather than fear it. The clearing around them shimmered as the energy manifested visibly, a subtle radiance like silver mist rising from the frost. The pack members watched in awe, the enemies scattered in fear, and for the first time the prophecy, the curse, the fear that had threatened to define their bond felt fragile, impotent against the sheer force of choice, love and courage. Kaelen pressed a hand to her forehead, a touch both grounding and electrifying. "Trust me," he murmured, and the words carried the weight of promise, protection and surrender. I will not let anything harm you, not now, not ever. Seraphine exhaled slowly, every shuddering breath reinforcing the transformation. Fear fractured. Trauma healed in invisible fissures that left her stronger, more whole than ever. The world, once oppressive and unforgiving, now seemed to pulse with possibility. The frost sparkled more vividly, the morning air hummed with energy, and the bond between them, once hidden, forbidden, dangerous, blazed openly, undeniable and eternal. She opened her eyes and met his, and in that gaze she saw it. Hope, trust, love, and the absolute certainty that together, they had shattered the invisible chains that had haunted her life. The curse, the invisible weight of fear, doubt, and limitation, had broken. And in its place, a new fate had been carved, one where their bond could flourish without secrecy, without fear, without compromise. Kaelen's lips brushed her temple, a silent promise, and she felt the warmth radiate through her, through every cell, every pulse, every fragment of her being. They had survived the storm, faced danger and impossible choices, and emerged not merely intact but transformed. Love had triumphed. Hope had been restored. And in that quiet, frost-kissed clearing, amidst the remnants of chaos and the golden light of dawn, Seraphine understood something she had never believed possible. They were free. Free to love. Free to live. Free to shape a destiny no longer dictated by fear, by prophecy, or by the ghosts of abandonment. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the frost and the world seemed to exhale, she knew deep in her soul that nothing, no rule, no curse, no enemy, would ever break what they had forged together in fire, sacrifice, and the absolute certainty of a love that refused to be denied. The first light of morning had finally broken through the dense canopy of the Crescent Moon forest, scattering the shadows that had clung stubbornly to the clearing through the night. The air was still, thick with frost and the faint tang of pine, every breath visible as mist, curling and vanishing like secrets that had lingered too long. Seraphine stood at the edge of the clearing, her fingers gripping the hem of her cloak, her chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. She had returned from the trials, from the storm, from the confrontation with prophecy and fate itself, but now, in the hush of dawn, a new tension gripped her. The need to finally speak the truth that had burned within her heart for so long. Kaelen was already there, standing near the remnants of the ceremonial circle, the frost glinting off his dark hair, silver eyes catching the early sun like twin moons. He had been watching the horizon, alert even in the calm, but the tension in his posture betrayed the weight of unspoken emotion. He turned as she approached, and the world seemed to contract, leaving only the two of them in a space that hummed with power, connection, and history. A history written in fear, in sacrifice, in shared danger and undeniable attraction. Every step Seraphine took felt heavy with significance. She remembered the nights of exile, the trembling moments when she had doubted her worth, the sting of abandonment, the humiliation she had endured in the village she once called home. Every memory surged forward like a tide, colliding with the warmth of Kaelen's presence, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel not shame or fear but clarity. The bond between them, the one marked in secret, tested in battle, forged in danger, was no longer a whisper, no longer hidden. It demanded acknowledgement, demanded declaration, demanded confession. Kaelen, her voice wavered, a fragile thread barely audible over the rustle of frost-bitten leaves. He turned fully then, eyes narrowing, and she saw the sharp edges of concern, of anticipation, of something deeper that mirrored her own turmoil. She had never seen him like this, stripped of ceremony and dominance, standing merely as a man before a woman he had claimed not with words but with force, with protection, with unwavering presence. He stepped closer, careful, deliberate, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile tension between them. "Seraphine," he said, voice low, rich with emotion, every syllable vibrating with urgency and unspoken longing. "What is it?" Her heart pounded. She felt the power that had once surged uncontrollably within her, now steadied, focused not on fear or survival, but on the unrelenting truth she could no longer deny. I can't wait any longer," she whispered, stepping closer until only the faintest breath separated them. "Kaelen, I've been holding this inside for too long." The tension between them was palpable, an invisible current that drew them together, yet kept them suspended in a state of trembling anticipation. He tilted his head slightly, eyes softening with a mixture of curiosity, hope, and something unguarded she had rarely, if ever, witnessed. "You don't have to. I mean, you don't need to." But she cut him off, voice steadying despite the quake in her chest. "No. I need to. I've survived storms, I've faced fear, I've confronted everything that tried to define me. And I've realized something. I can face it all because of you. Because I love you." The words hung in the crisp morning air, heavy and luminous, vibrating with raw truth. Kaelen froze, eyes widening in shock, but not fear, shock at the confession he had longed to hear, but had not allowed himself to hope for openly. His jaw tightened, his lips parting, then closing again as he processed the depth of what she had admitted. The power of her vulnerability struck him with more force than any enemy could, cutting through layers of alpha dominance, pack politics, and prophecy. "Seraphine," he murmured, stepping closer still, bridging the distance between them. "You have no idea how long I've waited to hear those words. How long I've wanted to hear them, and feared I never would." Tears welled in her eyes, the kind she had buried for years. Grief, relief, joy, and love all colliding into a single uncontrollable wave. She brushed a hand over her cheek, shaking slightly, and Kaelen mirrored her movement, his own hand rising to cup her face, warm and grounding. The frost at their feet seemed to vanish, the chill in the air giving way to a warmth that radiated from the bond now fully realized between them. "I love you," Kaelen said then, low, deliberate, each word a vow, a claim, a promise unbreakable. "I have loved you since the moment I first saw you, since the night you dared to step into my territory, fearless even when you had no reason to be. I've chosen you, and I will continue to choose you every day in every moment for as long as I live." Seraphine's breath caught. The walls she had built around her heart, the fear of rejection, the remnants of trauma, they all crumbled under the weight of his declaration. Her tears fell freely now, hot and unstoppable, carving clean paths down her frost-chilled cheeks. She pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm, and the tremor of emotion that ran through her own body. I was afraid," she admitted, voice breaking, vulnerability raw and unpolished. "Afraid that my past, my mistakes, my shiftlessness, would make you turn away. Afraid that I would never be enough for you, for anyone. But now I am enough. With you." Kaelen's eyes softened further, glistening in the morning light, and he leaned in, forehead resting against hers. The closeness was dizzying, intimate, and terrifying all at once. "You are everything," he whispered. "Everything I've ever needed, everything I've ever wanted. And you have nothing to fear. Not from me. Not from anyone. Not from fate itself." The forest around them seemed to exhale. Birds stirred, the first notes of song breaking the silence. A soft wind rustled the trees, carrying the scent of pine and frost and the lingering trace of magic that had thrummed through the clearing since the battle. The world seemed to affirm what they already knew. Their bond, forged in trials and danger, was real, undeniable, and invincible. Seraphine allowed herself to collapse against him, tears soaking into his chest, her arms wrapping around him in a grip that was equal parts desperation and relief. Kaelen responded instinctively, one arm circling her waist, the other cradling her head, holding her as though she were both fragile and unbreakable, both the storm and the calm after it. Every heartbeat, every breath, every infinitesimal movement between them reinforced the connection they had fought for, the bond that had survived prophecy, enemies, exile, and fear. I choose you," she whispered again, voice muffled against his chest, as if repeating it aloud might make it even more real. "I choose you. Always. Come home to me, Kaelen. Always." He pressed a kiss to her hair, slow, deliberate, reverent, as though sealing every word she had spoken into memory, into destiny. "I am home," he replied, voice rough with emotion. "I am yours entirely. And nothing, no darkness, no fear, no enemy can ever take you from me. You are my heart, my bond, my life." The tears that fell now were not of pain, but of release, of forgiveness, of joy so intense it threatened to overwhelm them both. Seraphine lifted her face, wiping her cheeks, her eyes locking on his, unguarded and shimmering with emotion. Kaelen mirrored her motion, brushing the remaining frost from her hair, his touch tender and deliberate, grounding them both in the new reality they had claimed together. The frost beneath their feet began to thaw, subtle but undeniable, as if the earth itself acknowledged the shift that had occurred. The curse of fear, the weight of trauma, the chains of prophecy. They were broken, shattered by courage, by confession, by the raw, unflinching love that neither time nor circumstance could deny. Kaelen pulled back slightly, enough to meet her gaze fully. No more secrets. No more fears. We face everything together. Always. Seraphine nodded, the tears still falling, but now mingled with laughter, uncontainable relief, and the unshakable joy of love finally spoken aloud. Always, she echoed. And in that moment the world seemed to expand around them. The clearing, the frost, the morning sun, the forest, the entire Crescent Moon Pack. Everything resonating with the certainty that two souls, bound by destiny, sacrifice and unwavering courage, had finally claimed their place in the world together. Kaelen lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that was tender, fierce and infinite all at once. It was a seal, a vow, a confession returned and mirrored. Seraphine responded with the full force of her heart, tears and laughter mingling, fears dissolving into the warmth of connection. Every moment of the past, the abandonment, the humiliation, the exile, the battles, the sacrifices, culminated in this single perfect instant. They pulled apart slightly, foreheads pressed together, breaths mingling, hearts synced. "I love you," Kaelen murmured again, as if saying it twice could make it eternal. "I love you," Seraphine replied, a smile breaking through her tears, fragile and radiant. "I choose you. Always." And in the hush of the forest, in the glow of the dawn, with frost melting beneath their feet and the promise of life stretching endlessly ahead, two souls, tested and tempered in fire and storm, finally found their home, not in a place, not in a title, not in prophecy, but in each other. The dawn rose over Crescent Moon territory with a brilliance that seemed to carry promise, renewal and the weight of new beginnings. Seraphine walked through the clearing once again, not as the frightened, abandoned girl who had stumbled into Kaelen's territory months before, but as someone transformed. Someone forged in trial, tempered by loss and reborn through love. Each step she took was firm, confident, the frost crunching beneath her boots echoing in the silence as a rhythm of reclamation. The pack moved around her not with suspicion or fear, but with a newfound respect. Whispers of recognition followed her path. Those who had doubted, those who had resisted, now observed quietly, acknowledging the power she carried not only in her latent magic but in the unwavering strength of her presence. Seraphine's once hidden abilities, the very powers her parents had scorned, were now undeniable, integrated seamlessly into the pack's intricate hierarchy. Kaelen stood nearby, leaning against the great oak that had been witness to so many of their trials. His eyes found hers, and the look he gave her carried both pride and quiet awe. He had witnessed the evolution, the transformation, the breaking of curses and fears. And in that gaze, Seraphine saw the reflection of her own growth. Not just a survivor but a leader in her own right, one who had earned a place in the hearts of the pack and in the hierarchy of the Crescent Moon. The council chamber, once tense with secrecy and the weight of hidden truths, now felt different, open, accepting and alive. Kaelen had shifted the pack's internal structures, dismantling the old systems that had allowed fear, prophecy and hierarchy to dominate over compassion and unity. Seraphine had a seat among the council now, a voice respected, a presence valued. The whispers that had followed her since childhood, shiftless, worthless, had been replaced by cautious admiration and acknowledgement. Walking through the territory, Seraphine observed the subtle shifts in pack behavior. Younger members approached her with curiosity, their fear tempered by her evident mastery of her abilities and her courage. They asked questions, sought guidance, and Seraphine answered patiently, her voice soft but imbued with authority. Each interaction was a reaffirmation. She belonged here not because she had fought for approval, but because she had claimed it through authenticity, bravery, and love. The bonds within the pack were also transformed. The previous tension that had lain beneath the surface, jealousies, rivalries, and lingering suspicion, began to dissipate. Kaelen had guided them through the storm, but Seraphine's presence, her story, her bravery in facing both danger and emotional truth, helped heal old rifts. She witnessed reconciliations between pack members who had been divided by politics or pride, and she knew that her role in this new world was not just to survive, but to nurture, to lead, to embody the hope and renewal that had been so desperately needed. Seraphine paused at the edge of a frozen pond, watching the sunlight dance on its surface. The reflections shimmered, fractured by the gentle ripple of water, mirroring the fragments of her past life that still lingered: abandonment, fear, and shame. But now they seemed distant, softened by the glow of belonging and triumph. Kaelen appeared beside her silently, offering a hand, a presence that anchored her even as the world shifted around them. "The pack. It's different now," she said, voice low, almost reverent. We've changed it." Kaelen's lips curved in a rare warm smile. "You changed it," he corrected gently. "Not me. You brought what was missing. The courage, the heart, the willingness to stand when others faltered. I led, yes, but you transformed." Seraphine's eyes shimmered with emotion, a mixture of pride and relief. She had feared her worthlessness for so long, had doubted her ability to ever be enough. Yet here she was, accepted, respected, a crucial piece of the Crescent Moon legacy. And more than that, she was loved entirely, irrevocably, and without condition. The air carried a subtle hum of magic, the echoes of transformation lingering as if the land itself celebrated their triumph. The pack, once tense with fear and hierarchy, moved with harmony, each member understanding their role not as a command imposed from above but as a contribution to a collective strength. Seraphine felt it deeply, her influence, her impact, her belonging. She belonged not merely because she had been claimed, but because she had claimed herself. Kaelen's hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally, a silent confirmation of the bond that had guided them through every storm. "We've built something new," he murmured. "A world where we don't just survive, we thrive." Seraphine nodded, drawing strength from his presence, from the pack, from herself. The clearing, the frost, the dawn, they were all part of this new world order, a testament to resilience, courage, and the undeniable power of love. And as she breathed in the crisp morning air, she felt a profound sense of belonging, the kind that had eluded her for so long. For the first time in her life, she knew she was home. The morning light deepened into the full brilliance of day, casting long shadows through the forest and illuminating the Crescent Moon territory in a golden glow. Seraphine stood at the heart of the clearing, surrounded by the pack, her chest swelling with a quiet pride. Today was not just a day of survival, not just a day of acknowledgement. It was a day of reward, of blessing, of celebration for everything they had endured and overcome. Kaelen approached her, eyes soft, yet sparkling with mischief and deep affection. In his hand he carried a small wooden box, intricately carved with symbols that hummed faintly with magic. Seraphine's breath caught as she realized that this was more than a gift. It was a recognition, an acknowledgement of all she had fought for, all she had endured, and all she had become. "This is yours," Kaelen said, voice low, reverent. "Not because you serve the pack, not because you follow me, but because you have earned it. Because you are extraordinary." Seraphine opened the box carefully, revealing a pendant shaped like a crescent moon, glowing faintly with silver light. She lifted it, feeling the subtle vibration of energy that spoke of heritage, power, and belonging. It was a blessing, a talisman, a symbol that she was recognized not just as Kaelen's mate, but as an integral part of the Crescent Moon lineage. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming surge of validation and love. I don't know what to say," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "It's perfect." Kaelen smiled, placing the pendant around her neck with care. "You don't need words. Just wear it. Let it remind you of what you've survived, what you've built, and what you are. You are a force, Seraphine. And nothing can diminish that." The pack watched silently, some stepping forward to offer congratulations, others bowing in respect. Seraphine realized that the acknowledgement she had longed for all her life, the respect, the acceptance, the recognition, was finally hers. Not because she begged for it, not because she needed validation, but because she had walked through fire and emerged transformed, whole, and radiant. Kaelen took her hand again, leading her to the center of the clearing. "There's more," he murmured. "The pack has decided to honor you further." One by one, the members of Crescent Moon stepped forward, offering gestures of blessing, gifts of rare herbs, talismans, heirlooms passed down through generations, even enchanted trinkets to aid her latent abilities. Each token carried meaning, a silent acknowledgement that she was not only accepted but revered. Every gift, every glance, every bow reinforced her place, her value, her impact. And then Kaelen spoke, voice carrying across the clearing. "Seraphine, not only do you hold a place in my heart, but you hold a place in the Crescent Moon legacy. Your courage, your love, your power. They will shape the pack, guide the pack, and inspire all who follow. We honor you and we bless you." Tears fell freely from Seraphine's eyes now, the culmination of every fear, every pain, every trial dissolving into this moment of acknowledgement, of reward, of blessing. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the warmth of the gifts, the presence of the pack and Kaelen's steady, unwavering support beside her. "I thank you," she whispered, voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, all of you, for seeing me, for accepting me, for loving me." Kaelen's hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally, and he pressed a gentle kiss to the back of her hand. "You have always deserved it," he murmured. "Never doubt that again. Not for a single moment." The sunlight seemed to intensify, bathing the clearing in brilliance, as if the world itself acknowledged the transformation, the healing, the blessings, the rewards. Seraphine felt it deep in her bones. The curse of abandonment, the wounds of shame, the fear of rejection, all had been replaced with recognition, love, and purpose. She was not only a survivor, she was a beacon, a force to be reckoned with, a fated Luna in every sense. Kaelen leaned in, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was both tender and triumphant, sealing the blessings, the acknowledgement, the love that surrounded them. Seraphine responded fully, allowing herself to absorb every sensation, the warmth, the validation, the joy. Every breath, every heartbeat, every trembling touch was affirmation. They had endured, they had triumphed, and they were free. And in that moment, amidst the frost-kissed clearing, the golden sunlight, and the chorus of the Crescent Moon Pack, Seraphine finally understood the full weight of reward. Not wealth, not power, not title, but the unshakable truth that she was seen, she was loved, and she was home. The wind stirred softly, carrying the scent of pine, earth, and distant moonlight, whispering promises of future days filled with peace, purpose, and the enduring magic of love. And as Seraphine rested in Kaelen's arms, surrounded by those who now accepted her as one of their own, she realized, fully and irrevocably, that every trial, every heartbreak, every challenge had been worth it, for this was the moment of ultimate blessing, of lasting peace, of complete and perfect reward. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over Crescent Moon territory, yet there remained a hush, a sacred quiet that seemed to hold the memory of everything that had passed, every trial, every heartbreak, every victory. Seraphine stood in the center of the clearing where so much had begun, her gaze drifting to the frost-worn wooden pendant that still hung around her neck. The crescent moon carved delicately into its surface glimmered in the morning light, silver threads catching the sun like whispers of destiny. She ran her fingers over the carvings, feeling the faint pulse of magic still alive within it, a reminder of who she had been and who she had become. It had been years, or had it only felt like years, since that first moment she had stepped into Kaelen's territory, trembling and unworthy, her 9-year-old self left behind in a village that had deemed her worthless. That fragile, terrified girl who had hidden her latent power, who had been abandoned by parents and mocked by villagers, seemed almost a stranger now. And yet she carried every fragment of that girl within her, every scar and tear woven into the tapestry of her growth, of her survival. Kaelen approached silently, the soft crunch of leaves under his boots a familiar rhythm. He stood beside her, shoulders relaxed, eyes warm and unwavering. He watched her trace the carvings on the pendant, and for a moment neither spoke, letting the silence honor the weight of what had been endured. Finally he broke it, voice low, rich and steady. "Do you remember the night you found this?" Seraphine smiled, the memory surfacing vividly, the trembling of her hands as she discovered the pendant hidden beneath the floorboards of the abandoned cabin, the faint warmth it seemed to exude, the silent whisper of possibility, of hope, of destiny yet untold. "I do," she said, her voice soft, almost reverent. "I remember thinking, maybe there's something out there for me. Something bigger than this fear, bigger than the shame." Kaelen nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "And now look at you. Not just surviving but thriving. Not just fighting but leading. Not just loved but claiming love in every sense." She turned to him, eyes glistening with the mixture of tears and laughter that had become familiar in moments like these. "It feels unreal," she admitted. "To think that I could go from a child left to die to this. To be part of the pack, to have a place, a purpose, a love so fierce I can feel it in every breath." He stepped closer, brushing a lock of hair from her face, his hand lingering as though he could physically anchor her to the present, to the reality of what they had built together. "It's real," he said, voice almost a whisper but strong enough to carry through the clearing. "Everything we've endured, it's led us here. And this." He gestured around them, the pendant resting between them, the pack in harmony, the sunlight filtering through the leaves. "This is only the beginning." Seraphine let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of that truth sink into her bones. The pendant pulsed faintly, the magic within it resonating with her own power now fully awakened, fully embraced. It was a symbol, yes, but it was more than that. It was proof. Proof that even the most broken, abandoned, and forsaken soul could find redemption, could find love, could carve a life of meaning and power. She lifted the pendant and held it between her fingers, eyes scanning the intricate carvings that had seemed so mysterious years ago. The crescent moon gleamed back at her, a reflection not just of night but of cycles, of beginnings and endings intertwined, of shadows giving way to light. She remembered the cold nights she had spent alone, hiding in the forest, imagining a life she wasn't sure she deserved. And now she realized that life had been waiting for her all along. Waiting for the moment she was brave enough to claim it. Kaelen's presence was steady beside her, a reminder that she did not need to face the world alone anymore. "Every choice, every risk, every fear you overcame, it led to this," he said, voice threaded with awe and unspoken admiration. "You were never truly alone, Seraphine. Not when you carried the courage inside you that even you didn't know existed." Her lips curved into a smile, tears threatening but not falling. "I carried it because of you," she admitted, voice trembling but certain. "Because you believed in me before I could even believe in myself." He took her hand then, fingers curling around hers with a gentle strength that spoke louder than words. "And I will continue to believe in you," he promised. "Every day, every moment, no matter what challenges come. You are mine, Seraphine. Fated, bound, and unshakable." A hush fell over the clearing as she felt the weight of that promise. The bond between them, once tested by separation, betrayal, prophecy, and danger, now stood unbreakable, a tether stronger than any magic, stronger than fear, stronger than destiny itself. And as she pressed the pendant to her chest, she felt the symbolic weight of their journey. A journey that had begun in fear and abandonment, that had surged through betrayal and trial, and had now arrived at this place of triumph, peace, and love. Around them, the Crescent Moon Pack moved with quiet reverence. They understood without words that this moment marked not an ending but a full circle beginning. The cycles of growth, struggle, and triumph had completed themselves, leaving space for new adventures, new bonds, and new challenges that they would face together, side by side. The forest seemed to exhale, leaves rustling softly, the sunlight catching the frost on the branches, creating prisms of light that shimmered as though blessing the pair. Seraphine looked at Kaelen, and in that gaze she saw all the storms they had weathered reflected back at her. The fear, the longing, the despair, the sacrifices, the battles. But she also saw the love, fierce and unwavering, the victories hard-earned, the bonds forged in fire and blood. And she knew finally, completely, that they had survived not merely to endure, but to thrive, to love, and to continue shaping the world around them together. Her hand tightened around his, the pendant swinging between them like a heartbeat of their shared destiny. "The child I was, lost and afraid, she would never believe this was possible," she murmured. "But the woman I am, knows this is only the beginning." Kaelen brushed a thumb across her knuckles, eyes soft and filled with unshakable certainty. "And we'll face every beginning together," he said. "Every dawn, every challenge, every triumph. You're my heart, Seraphine. And I am yours. Always." The wind stirred gently through the trees, carrying with it the faint whispers of magic, the lingering scent of frost and pine, and a promise that the future held more than they could yet imagine. Seraphine tilted her head, feeling that wind on her face, and for the first time in her life she felt fully unburdened, fully seen, fully alive. As the forest settled into the rhythm of the new day, she spoke, voice soft but filled with clarity. "Kaelen, wherever we go from here, whatever comes, I will carry this moment with me. The bond, the love, the triumph. It is ours. And it always will be." Kaelen pulled her close, forehead resting against hers, eyes locked in mutual understanding and devotion. "It is ours," he agreed, "and nothing can ever take it away." Seraphine's fingers traced the carvings on the pendant one last time, a symbolic callback to the journey that had brought them here. The abandoned child, the trials, the exile, the battles, the confessions and the triumphs. It was a full-circle moment, a reminder that the past, however painful, had always led to this. The life, the love, the home she had longed for and now finally claimed. And as they stood there, bound by love, magic and fate, the narrator's voice would echo for the listener, carrying the final call. If you felt Seraphine's pain and Kaelen's love, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Anne's romance collections for more heart-wrenching werewolf shifter romances. Which moment of Seraphine's journey touched you most? Comment below. Every thought, every feeling matters and we love hearing from you. And remember, the story doesn't end here. New adventures, new dangers and new bonds await in the shadows of Crescent Moon territory. Stay tuned because the next journey is closer than you think. The wind shifted once more, carrying the faint shimmer of magic, the soft hum of life and the unbreakable promise of love, the kind that survives storms, defies destiny and endures beyond time itself. And there, in the light of the rising sun, with the pendant swinging gently between them, Seraphine and Kaelen embraced the full circle of their journey, their hearts intertwined, their souls irrevocably bound, ready for whatever dawn would bring.